What is going on, everyone? We are back with the review of A Night in Terror Tower. So, we just finished watching, and this is another one of my favorite episodes. One of my favorite stories as well. Um, so, before we get any further, please remember, if you check the description below, you can actually find a link to go over to Patreon where you can watch everything a week early. If you're watching this on YouTube, you could already be watching the next show with us instead of Goosebumps. Whatever it may be, show, movie, not sure. However, uh, absolutely having a good time with this specifically. Man, it's. So just to give you guys, let me do this. So this is A Night in Terror Tower based off of Goosebumps book number 27, A Night in Terror Tower. This was written by directed by William Fruitt, written by Dan Angel and Billy Brown, and these episodes released February 25th, 1996. Again, fantastic couple of episodes. So, to give you guys a quick little rundown of the story, Sue and Eddie, our brother and sister, they're on a family trip to England. Their parents are at a conference and they're taking a tour bus with another tour group around. Early on in the tour, they talk about wanting to visit Terror Tower, which was advertised on TV, which they eventually do make it there. So they go to Terror Tower. They're going through Terror Tower with the group. There's a bunch of really cool wax figures. The guide starts to tell the story of this brother and sister who were prince and princess of England. And they got captured after their parents were killed and thrown into the jail cell. The guy doesn't continue the story. They progress on through the dungeon, and then all of a sudden, Eddie and Sue start to be chased by this high executioner guy who looks really cool. They eventually make it out of the tower and into this the regular world, like outside of the tower. They just get out of the tower and they go back to the hotel and they're trying to find they go to pay. I'm sorry, they go to pay the cab fare that they got, and they have old money that doesn't work. So they're like, well, we'll go in and find our parents, and we'll come back to you. So they go inside, and once they get inside, they go to ask the guy, the main guy running the hotel counter, if they could get a key to the room because their parents are on a conference, and the guy's like, "Look, there is no conference going on. We don't know what you're talking about." He's like, "Now what room are you in?" And they give him the room number, and I want to say I think the room number is probably the date of the past that they used to live in, if I'm guessing. Again, making a wild guess. I don't think there was ever anything that stated exactly what it was. However, they he says that room is vacant, and he's like, well, "What are your parents' last names?" And they can't. He said, "What is your last name?" And they were like, neither one of them could remember what their last name was. So they go to hide out from the cab guy in the restaurant. The guy starts chasing them through the hotel, and the cab guy comes in, starts to chase them. When he finds them, they run into a kitchen where the high executioner dude shows up, and he starts moving these stones around in his hand, and everybody disappears and reappears somewhere else. So they then proceed to. They basically appear back in the past, and her brother had been taken, and she wakes up in this town, and everybody's following her around. She goes. The high executioner dude shows up. She goes to run, asks this lady to hide him, gives her some coins. She says absolutely, so she hides her in the basket. As soon as the high executioner comes in, she's like, "Yeah, I got her in this basket." Absolutely wretch of a fucking woman. Um, so she takes the princess, the princess, uh, to the tower with her brother. So Sue and Eddie are sitting there, and once they get inside the jail, this other guy shows up, and he's like, "Yo, I don't remember what his name is exactly. Morgrid, it actually says right here. Sorry. Morgrid is like, hey, I'm actually the sorcerer to the king, uh, and you guys are the prince and princess of York. And your real names are Suzanne and Edward, and your parents are dead. And I promised to send you into the past. Or I promised to take care of you, so I sent you into the future. That's what he did. I sent you into the future. I wanted to go with you, but I wasn't able to make it. Um, and they're like, oh, well. They can't remember any of this. They think he's crazy at first. The guys come and basically announce that they're going to execute the two of them. And right before they're about to head out, they're in their regular, what would have been princely and princessly, their royal garments. And all of a sudden, they remember everything, and they also, speak with an English accent. It's a fantastic transition. And as they thank Morgrid, he's sad because he was really wanting to hold up on his end of everything and really take care of them. He was sorry that sending them to the future didn't work. So they get to the executioner's room, and the High Executioner's donning his executioner's garment. And at first, Morgard runs up to plead with the High Executioner's like, please let me send them back into the future. Do with me as you will. And the guy's like, why? So they could figure out a way to come back when they're older and possibly take me out? Not going to happen. So then Eddie, or Edward, remembers he's actually a really good pickpocket, which has been a thing throughout the entire episode of him pickpocketing people. And he runs up to plead with the High Executioner, manages to steal the stones that Morgrid needs to perform his, magic. Tosses the stones over to Morgrid, and between the three of them, they stop whoever tries to come and get in the way. And they end up waking up. The two of them end up waking up back in the present day, 1996, and they're greeted by a guy that works in Terror Tower, as well as the tour guide. I could not remember the fucking name of that thing. They're greeted by the tour guide. He's like, "Hey, they'd have had my head if I lost you guys in here. It's time for us to go." And then Morgrid shows up, and he's like, "Hey, they're technically I'm in charge of watching over them." And you realize that technically they are actually the prince and princess. And so they get outside and they ask the guy, "Hey, you never finished the story. What happened to the prince and princess?" And the guy's like, "Don't know. They disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to them." And that's the twist ending. I was really hoping like they were going to run into their parents in some way, shape, or form in the present day, but just to see if they did have parents or anything. Now, as far as my actual review of it, I love the story. Obviously, there's some things that get a little bit confusing once you start dealing with time travel. Like, I think it's cool how they explain that they started forgetting who they were because they were starting to remember who they really were. It's like a transition. I thought it was a really cool twist overall. And oh yeah, speaking of twist, the very, very, very end, after the bus leaves with everybody, the High Executioner is back in the present day, and he's got one of the three stones. However, I think the other twist of them actually being the prince and princess was actually really cool, and I'm glad that they went that route. The big difference between like this and Say Cheese and Die, right? And I might have this slightly above Say Cheese and Die now that I've watched them as I'm older. I still love the story of Say Cheese and Die. I still think it's a good episode. However, the acting in this was just so much better. Like, say Cheese and Die, you had, a young Ryan Gosling who did a really good job. I have no complaints, but like, he was almost the only person that had a decent outing as an acting. And like, you had the one dude that was a cop that was, I swear, was like the same age as Ryan. He looked super young, and like they overdid some of the acting with that, where everything here actually felt natural. Um, and yeah, I do think this is a really really good episode, and in fact, I it might be one of the just best overall episodes in the entire series. Um, but yeah, so tomorrow you guys are going to get the next episode of Twilight Zone being discussed, and then the day after that is the last episode you're going to get from me for the first season of Goosebumps before we switch it up. I will run the randomizer wheel. We might get Goosebumps again. It's probably not going to happen, but if it does, we'll start season 2 of Goosebumps. Which does have some more of my favorite episodes in it. It's actually got Attack of the Mutant. That's the one I was talking about. Bad Hair Day is a good one. The Headless Ghost is okay. Go Eat Worms. You Can't Scare Me. Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes, which is another one of my Ghost Beach. Haunted Mask 2. It's got some bangers. Got some burgers. Monster Blood. More Monster Blood. Like they got some burgers. I'm actually excited for this. So we'll see. Eventually, we'll get there. It's going to happen. But all right, guys, that is going to do it for this review. Also, don't forget when we cover the next Goosebumps episode, which is The Werewolf of Fever Swamp, and it's a two-parter. When we do cover that, afterwards, you'll get a third video that day where we rank all of the episodes in season 1 of Goosebumps. So that's super exciting when we get there. So with that being said, guys, we love you. We'll see you next time. Peace.